The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're so pleased to have one member of the House of Delegates with his staff director with us this morning, Chris Jones, Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. Good to see you, sir.
Good morning, Woody. Pleasure to be here.
And the staff director, Robert Vaughn. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Woody.
Well, Chris, I think a week ago today, the House adopted its budget, and you are well on your way to completing this session, hopefully.
We are. Of course, we're in the conferee part of the program where the Senate has rejected our budget. We've rejected their budget. And the 13 of us have started meeting. We started last Friday, I think.
Yes.
And we've had very productive meetings so far. Met this morning with Senator Norman for about 30-45 minutes, and very optimistic we'll get done on time, if not maybe a day early.
Great. Give us some broad outlines of what's in the House budget.
When we got here in, I guess, we heard the governor back in December.
Yep. And
then he laid out his budget for us. He was very conservative in many areas, putting cash for certain items in the second year. He did 100% on the VRS, Virginia Retirement System payments that are determined by the board in the first year for state employees and in the second year for teachers. So we took his document, we built on that. We actually have taken a pay raise for state employees from the second year to the first year. We're going to take care of a deferral that was made, I guess, 6 years ago when we had the downturn in 2010. We were about $193 million on that. We're going to take that down completely and save us about $88 million over the biennium. So we have a very structurally balanced budget. And in the K-12 area, what we did, lottery money used to go back to the localities on a per pupil, the average daily membership, and the composite index. And so we're going to start to unwind what we did from 2010. So we are putting, I think, about 30%.
In fiscal 18, it will represent 31%, and the policy up until 2010 was 40% of the lottery flew back to localities on a per pupil amount based on ADM.
And what's so nice about that is the governor put additional money in for both higher ed and K-12. But his K-12 money, had some strings attached to it. There were 4 items. One was teacher pay raise in the second year, a match. The VRS component in the second year was a match. And then positions that you would be required to certify required a local match. And then the at-risk money. So what we did, we took 2 of the 4. We sent those back to localities with no strings attached, meaning that they could determine how they spent their money without having to hire a teacher to get the money. And the Senate did something similar, a little different methodology, but we liked the lottery idea.
Great. If you had to describe the major differences between the House budget proposal and the Senate budget proposal, what would they be?
Well, as Chairman indicated, one of the largest is the House's decision to go ahead and pay back the deferral on the Virginia retirement system. It's $190 million approximately, and it accomplishes many tasks, if you will. One is it's a liability that we owe, and it's not a liability that we have something to hold for it. It was based on a deferral of not paying contribution rates back in 2010 that we had tough choices back then. And so when the rating agencies look at our balance sheet, if you will, I mean, that's just a liability. Right. That, again, there's no underlying asset. It's just something we owe. So once you can move that off, that looks good for the rating agencies. Then it made sense because we free up payroll. It's about 1% of payroll. Mm-hmm. So not only does the general fund side of the ledger save money, but the non-general fund side. And a good example of a non-general fund are your colleges and universities. Mm-hmm. They had already increased tuition a couple of years ago to begin their share of that repayment. And so what the chairman is proposing did not require the universities on their tuition piece to actually do the repayment. We're doing it for them. And that was part of our strategy of also helping to address the ever-increasing tuition, if you will. So that was it's a major difference, one that we would hope would find favor with the Senate. I think the other major difference is, our pay raises for state employees. While both budgets advanced it to the first year, the chairman, understanding sort of the issues with state government and state employees, and the fact that we're the only entity, if you will, that gets to decide their pay raise, that he led the committee to a 3% pay raise for the state workers and college faculty.
You mentioned the rating agencies. Let's make sure our audience understands who you're talking about, why that's important, and what kind of rating the Commonwealth enjoys.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Well, we are one of, 8
Yes.
AAA states, which means that's the highest rating you can have. We've held that since the 40s, I believe. I think that's correct.
It's 3 rating agencies.
There's Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch's. And so we will go up, they will either come down here, we'll go to New York once a year, and they look at the financial health of our Commonwealth. And we went several years ago, and they were very pleased with our just dealing with head-on, pension concerns. We had the Speaker had a bill 4 years ago, and John Watkins, Senator Watkins, now retired, to fix our quote-unquote retirement plan with a payment schedule to get to 100% of the rates. So we're going to get 2 years ahead of schedule.
Yep.
We will certify and be paying that 100% rate of payroll. So they really like what we've done, and we will maintain our AAA bond rating as long as I'm around. And that means you don't do a lot of stuff that might catch your eye, but you do the basic stuff you do at home. You pay your bills, and it's kind of kitchen table common sense. You pay what needs to be paid, and you can do the things you can do, but you don't overextend yourself.
And of course, to the extent you need to borrow money, that means you can borrow at a much lower rate.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, the governor talked about doing a general obligation bond back last year, and we decided not to do that because you get the highest rate when you go with the full faith and credit with the voters voting on it. But there's such a small difference between the AAA and the AA plus. I mean, it's de minimis.
It's maybe 15 basis points.
Yeah, and it speaks to the quote-unquote financial strength of our Commonwealth.
Now, what about the rainy day fund? Is it being replenished?
$605 million. That money actually accumulated in in this current biennium. We had set aside last session some of the revenue increase, knowing that we were going to have a required payment. So in this budget that we're developing in fiscal 17, a deposit of $605 million will occur. That will take the fund balance back up to $845 million, about 90% of the level it was before we had to start withdrawing back in 2008, 2010.
And on that point, if I could, we actually, in the last budget that we're in this current year, we set that money aside. We could have spent it, but we said, no, we need to reserve that so you don't have additional expenditures that you've got to take care of before you pay into rainy day fund. So we didn't do spending items in this current budget on purpose. We put money aside so when we got into this next coming up biennium budget, that money's already there.
Now, the pause button has been hit in Washington in terms of sequestration.
Yes.
Now, there was a federal emergency contingency fund. Where does that stand?
You're talking about the FACT fund?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The FACT fund, we put about, it had about $5 or $6 million in it.
A couple of years ago.
And that has been utilized. We had, I think Langley got some money, Fentress Airfield. We had a couple of unmanned space flight drones, and there was something we did in Northern Virginia as well. And so, but to that point, we were with the governor 2 days ago, and we have to be mindful of what's going to happen when they do another round of BRAC. And
the base realignment.
The base realignment, yes, sir. They might call something different, but we're confident they're going to be doing something to realign our bases again. So collectively, Senate, House, and Governor, we have been working for the last handful of years with the administration to be prepared and make sure we can make our case of why they need to, repurpose and concentrate in Virginia because of our closeness to, of course, Washington, D.C., and the assets that we have in our Commonwealth.
Right. Now, what about funding strategic investments for purposes of job creation?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Kathy Byron and Frank Ruff, Senator Frank Ruff, had a credentialing bill this year. Because you've heard, it's been a rush to get so many degrees. The previous administration said 100,000 degrees, which is great. But what we found, if you're engineer, professional type, you need about 8 to 10 jobs to underpin that position. So credentialing has always been an issue for us, trying to work with the community college system. And so the nice thing is we put about 22 million, I think it's like 9 and I forget how much, a total of about 22 million over the 2 years to be able to, with a community college, working with individual students, they'd pay 25%, one-third of their what it would cost to attend and get that credential.
Which is sort of the same policy we do on the degree side. The Commonwealth puts up for a Virginia student 2/3 of the cost, and then the students expect to pay 1/3. So we modeled it after that same.
But the difference in this is it's not as you go along. When they complete the class and they get their credential, then they get reimbursed.
That's right.
And so it's an incentive, and we think that's going to be a big game changer for us, especially on the manufacturing arena and some of the other areas that we haven't done so well when we compete with South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia.
And it's going to also be tied to the credentialing, the type of skills that industry is looking for.
For a region. That's a good point.
Within a region, right. So the reimbursement is tied to you, the individual participating in that credentialing program that is in high demand.
You might have a different demand in Northern Virginia versus South Side versus Southwest. So we don't want to just create X number of cyber security specialists unless we really need that many cyber security specialists.
Right. Now you also mentioned holding down the cost of tuition at our institutions of higher learning. What's happening in terms of the community colleges? Are they being adequately funded?
In the House budget, I had mentioned the 1/3, 2/3.
Right.
If you look at the new money that the House put in for higher education for the upcoming biennium, and if you were to factor in what would they need to raise tuition, it's about 3%. And so at least for this biennium under the House budget, we would achieve that 2/3 of their new money would be coming from the state, and only 1/3 would be expected to come from the student or parent. And again, under the House budget, with the resources that we put in, we're about $40 million more in the House budget than the Senate budget. And that really translates into approximately a 3% tuition, which is considerably less than we have seen in the last 10 years. And in fact, UVA,
just announced
2 weeks ago, it was the day after the House budget came out, guess it was, that the tuition for the next academic year will only be 3%.
Great. Teacher pay raises, you mentioned that's been accelerated to the first year of the budget?
In the Senate budget, they moved to the first year. What we did in our budget, we allowed, if a jurisdiction wants to give a teacher pay raise in the first year, they get credit to draw down the money in the second year. So that's one of the differences in our compensation package between the two bodies. But when you overlay and compare the Senate version and the House version, we're not that far apart in the amounts of monies outside of K-12 in higher ed. And we're working through those issues now. But our teachers, what we felt on the lottery piece was that the local governments know better what they need, the school divisions, than we do in Richmond. Because many took different approaches during the downturn from 2009 until today. So if we prescribe you've got to do this, that, and that, they really can't go back and maybe refresh their technology. They can't go in, buy new buses. They can't go in, and they don't have the flexibility. And so what we did with the lottery that was different than what it was previously, we do not require a local match. Before, if you got $1, you had to have a 50% match, 50 cents match, pretty much.
And that translates into, if you compare it to the governor's proposal, it's about $136 million savings to the local governments. So not only did you provide the school divisions no string attached dollars, if you will, in full discretion on how to use it, but on the local side, which is their funding partner, state's one partner, the local government, property taxes is the other, it translates to $136 million savings.
Now, we focused on pay raises for teachers, but there's a pay raise for state employees, is there not?
That's correct. Yeah. And the Speaker, Speaker Howell actually had, he's got a commission that's going to look at the workforce. And he's going to be looking at we just did about 4 years ago, I mentioned on the VRS, what we call final average annual compensation and what is your replacement income. So we're going to be looking at what we pay our employees who are currently working, what the employees would make when they retire. So it's going to be a couple-year study.
Right.
And so we did a 3-year pay raise in the first year. We put a 1% reserve in the second year as a down payment towards whatever actions might come out of that commission.
Now, how do we compare in terms of K through 12 this year versus 2007, 2008?
Well, in terms of the aggregate funding, it's more. On a per pupil, we're still recovering because of many decisions that were made, if you will. Part of that decision making was no longer allowing all the lottery or 40% of the lottery to flow back to school divisions. Instead, we used that money to pay for things that the general fund would have otherwise put up its share. A good example would be textbooks. Okay, so whereas the general fund put up the state's share on the textbooks, we then swapped it out and said, out of that 40% that we used to send back to the school divisions, it's now going to pay for it. So that is, I think, the impetus as to why we're trying to reestablish that policy. It was a good policy for school divisions and for local governments. And again, in the House budget in fiscal 18, we would be at 31%.
And to put it in perspective, when the governor introduced his budget, what we have in our budget is $70 million more than what he had in his. Now, for full disclosure, it's only really, when you look at it, about 40, but they always have these technical corrections that are made. So from the time he introduced his budget to the time we got to act on it, they had lost about $28 million with technical corrections. So we made up that 28, plus added another 40 or 41. So we're $70 million more than what would have been in the budget had we accepted and passed his budget as it came to us.
In terms of what gets actually distributed to the school divisions.
Let's talk a little bit about a matter you've been involved in for a number of years, dealing with tolling, because there was a real controversy in your district with Elizabeth Crossings. And I know you have a bill that's still pending in the General Assembly dealing with tolling. Talk to us about how that got started and where you hope it ends.
Well, I got started with the ERC deal, where we got saddled with the toll with no free option to get around. Of course, last year I put in the reform bill for the public-private partnership, which is how we got the P3 down in Hampton Roads. The bill 1069 and 1070. 1069 would have said that you could not toll a road unless it's free in new lanes. In other words, your free lanes have to be the number today that they are when you get done. So a good example for home, back in Hampton Roads, is the high-rise bridge. It's got 4 free lanes, 2 each direction. If we were to allow a toll on that, if my bill passes, you would still have 2 free lanes each direction. Then you could add 2 or 4 lanes that could be tolled, but it's your choice. You would not be required to go in a tolled lane to get to work, which is what we had no choice with the Midtown-Downtown Tunnel. Ran into a little bit of problem last night in the Senate Transportation Committee, but in the bill also it had some consumer protections. If you have Easy Pass from the state, if you give them your cell phone number and your email address, and you go through and there's not enough money on your account or it was a malfunction, you would get a text or an email within a day, 3.5 or 4 days, saying there's a problem, Woody. Then you could go check your balance and you can fix it. They would give you a second notice after 9 days. So now what's going to happen with what did pass the Senate, you'll be notified electronically of any issue with your Easy Pass to correct it. And they did that at the South Norfolk Jordan Bridge, this policy, and they reduced the number of violations by like 90%. So it's good common sense legislation. And also we have a reciprocity agreement that was included in the bill. We owed about $21 million from out-of-state drivers who just blow through the tolls, and some are much more, I guess, blatant than others. They might live in Maryland or Washington, D.C. So there's a tremendous amount of money that's outstanding. So we will enter into an agreement. If the bill passes, the governor will with other states, and we'll be able to collect tolls from out-of-state individuals that owe Virginia. If they don't pay us, then they can put a hold on their registration in Maryland or North Carolina or D.C.
Now, was there an additional element in terms of a cap on the amount of fines?
Absolutely, yes. We reduced the fines and fees by half, and then we capped what you could be charged at $2,200. But we hope with the notification piece that you'll reduce the number of those violations by 90%. So yeah, we capped it, what could be charged, we reduced the fees, we have a notification process, and we are going to be able to collect money from out-of-state motorists.
Now, another issue near and dear to your heart is the Port of Virginia. I
Yes.
understand there's a $350 million request for funding there as well.
Yes, I have a bond bill, and so does Senator Hanger in the Senate. We both have language in the budget dealing with the port. We have $350 million to address NIT, Norfolk International Terminal, looking to densify that and get it ready for these new post-Panamax ships. They're finishing up the gate there in another probably 9 months, and the throughput on that facility will be able to be increased dramatically. It's going to probably add, with the renegotiation and extension of the lease across the river in Portsmouth, will increase capacity almost 60%.
I believe so.
I think it's about 60 to 65%, which should take us for the next 10 to 12 years. And then we can hopefully have Craney Island where that needs to be as we continue to grow that port, which is such an important part of our economic engine in Virginia.
So we certainly need to keep that competitive advantage because New York and I think Charleston, they're in the process of dredging.
That's correct.
To become more competitive.
And we had a presentation the other, about 3 or 4 weeks ago in front of the committee, R.B. Lane, the Secretary of Transportation, and everybody's saying, well, the slowdown of the economy, there are going to be less ships. Well, there will be less ships, but they're going to be bigger.
That's right.
Much
Fewer
bigger.
ports of call.
Fewer ports of call. So what we've got to do is be ready in Hampton Roads to be one of the 2 ports that any line wants to, quote unquote, stop when they come in or when they leave. We'll be first in, last out, so to speak. So that's got to be our quest. And we've been working with the maritime community, with the Port Authority, with the Transportation Secretary, and with my colleagues, and we're confident that we will get where we need to be, taking the dredging to 55 feet. We want to do a double wide, as they say, because we've got the largest installation base, naval base in the world in Norfolk. So we want to have those ships be able to pass by without having like a traffic jam in our channel. So we have to be very mindful of that. So that's why this 350 is so important. That's kind of the first step in a multi-step process to get us where we need to be the preeminent port on the East Coast.
And of course, this commerce is very important, not only to the Commonwealth, but nationwide.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we've got the we've got the inland port.
That's correct.
In Warren County. We've got the Port of Richmond here.
And they just signed an agreement recently here, and we're looking to bring barge traffic up. And so, yeah, it has a Southside Virginia.
Yeah,
If you look at the map where all the businesses have something to say or touch the port, it's pretty astonishing. And we're doing. I mean, the governor and Todd Haymore have done a wonderful job. Our exports on the agriculture side have really just taken off, and I believe we're one of only a handful of ports we have more exports than we have imports.
So we have a real balance.
We have a very balanced.
Which
We
is
have a
very
very
important.
balanced port, which is extremely important.
Right. Talk to us a little bit more about the process you're now engaged in terms of the conference committee, how you staff the members of the House, and how you work with the other staff members in the Senate.
I'm listening. I'm just kidding.
Well, it's much like when we first sat down, we had to hurry up and wait. There's a lot of idle time because there's a lot of briefing that goes on both sides. We break up into small work groups where the chairman will assign 2 or 3 of the members on a particular issue. So higher education, there'll only be 3 members on each side. Makes it very efficient. And so we spend a lot of time prepping before each of those meetings. We try to go over the issues that we've already discussed, which ones we need to come back around and have a discussion on. Sometimes those group discussions result in additional information that's needed. Last night we had a meeting with public safety, and there were some proposals with the Senate that clearly we needed more information on how they arrived at their decision to pull money out of corrections, for instance. So it's really just trying to bring the information, and the role of the staff is in some respects to facilitate and make sure that the members, both staff will do this, that the members understand the position that each budget took, so that the members can then have that policy discussion. And so it's an important function. Myself and Betsy Daly, who's my counterpart, one of our primary jobs is just to keep the track on spending and savings, so that we finish, we're balanced, and that's very important.
So do you wind up crunching a lot of numbers for the members?
Yeah, but because clearly conference is about compromise at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we do is we re-examine the proposal and come up with a new strategy of how we can do it to make it meaningful, because just giving less money or doing less of a cut, or I mean, there's a consequence for all those actions. So we constantly are rethinking in order to achieve a parity or a compromise with the Senate.
Great. Chris, I think there were 3 objectives you set forth a week ago when the budget was announced. You wanted to prioritize savings, you wanted to reduce state liabilities, and you wanted to cut back on borrowing and make targeted investments. Do you think you've reached those goals?
We're very close. We just want to compliment Robert and Betsy. I think they make us collectively, the Finance and Appropriations Committee members, look very good. They work tirelessly in the interim. They're the consummate professionals. And so we just give direction to them to kind of come back and bring us and give us some guidance. So we're able to do those 3 things because of the staffs that we have and the nature that we have that we work together. While there might be some competition between House and Senate members per se, we like our ideas, end of the day we all know we got to get it done for the Commonwealth. It's been an honor for me to lead the committee and to be a part of the conference for the last 6 years.
Now, we mentioned the Port of Virginia. There's also there was a bonding package of about $1.6 billion.
Right, yes, sir. And matter of fact, met on that this morning. We get in early and leave late during the last couple of weeks. And we're working through those issues now. We'll probably do about 3.5 years or so of bonding capacity, which would be in the neighborhood of 1.8, 1.9, maybe touch $2 billion. But that'll be over, we'll issue that over about a 4 to 5 year period.
Yes.
But we can then plan higher education, state facilities, things of that nature.
Research.
Research,
Our
yes.
universities.
It's a very interesting job.
Oh, that's a good point. I want to expand a little bit on the research funding for the University of Virginia, Virginia Tech, the other research universities, and how they are handling those monies and what they are doing with them.
Well, I've also got a bill at 1343 on research, and we've actually sat down with all 4 of the institutions, Mason, VCU, UVA, and Tech, and they want to compete in a pool of dollars for projects
And work
collaboratively.
Yes.
Which is more important for us. And we've got the ANOVA project on genomics in Northern Virginia, on the old ExxonMobil site. So most of our meetings this session have been on just that, generating and trying to develop the new economy in Virginia. We're very blessed with our institutions of higher learning. They're a vital part of our economic engine, and we need them working together.
Great. Well, thank you for being here, Chairman Chris Jones and Robert Vaughn.
Thank you very much, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.